Well, today's episode should offend a whole nother group of people because I'm going to pick on someone other than Whitey for a change. Deb Haaland can wear a lot of hats for what she represents. Any of these should suit her. Spanish missionaries, conquistadors, pilgrims, Puritans, hunters and trappers, ranchos, and modern-day ranchers. Just as long as she doesn't wear a Native American headdress. Why am I picking on her? The people that you have some hope in, people that you have expectations for, well, they're the ones that hurt the most, not people that you never expected anything good from. Why does my voice sound the way it sounds today? Well, it's actually appropriate to share with you why, because I've been hauling food and water out to the animals at the Bone Dry Creek in this incredible heat and the smoky air and all these wildfires that we're having. So I've been exposed to some pretty bad air quality. And what's the Department of Interior doing? Continuing to glorify the industries that are largely responsible for putting us in this environmental situation. Let me rewind to last semester in my natural history and ecology course. One professor in particular was keen on shining a light on the persecution of Native Americans and how we've treated them throughout history. And she'd have an additional assignment for us each week to learn a little bit more about that and everything that has happened to them after colonialism. And as you can imagine, there was quite a bit of disturbing stuff. We also learned about the different approaches to nature, different philosophies, different movements over the years, the idea of manifest destiny, the frontier environmental view, utilitarianism, conservation, preservation. And that's why it's so disturbing to hear our first Native American Secretary of the Interior give so much priority to, quote, working lands, quote, working landscapes. Farms and ranches are included in the 30 by 30 initiative, meaning that the very things that hurt the planet are going to be protected under the guise of helping the planet. That's how disconnected from nature we are right now. Working lands is basically code for exploitation and extraction. And through the years, we have learned to put that on a pedestal as though it's something great, as long as you have a cowboy hat on and are out in open space. Today, most humans are so detached from nature that they think anything other than a skyscraper or some sort of development project is the same thing as being friendly with nature. Look, pastures are not nature. Eradicating native wildlife for the sake of ranching operations is not nature. Bulldozing native plants to make room for an ag business is not nature. Pesticides to prevent nature from trying to be a part of your newly created habitat, which is crops, is not nature. Draining water from the land, from natural water sources, to grow your agricultural products, or even worse, to water your water-guzzling cattle, is not nature. No matter what argument that you want to throw at it, whether it be culture, history, way of life, tradition, gotta eat. Bottom line is, it's not nature. And it's not friendly with nature. I'm not sitting here trying to put Native Americans on a pedestal of being flawless or the ultimate saints of interacting with nature in a friendly way. I'm just pointing out how long they lived in America as a part of nature. They lived in the forests rather than looking at the forests as a commodity. I don't even have to go into breaking down exactly what their practices were, what their way of life was. The proof is in how long they lived here and how long the land was healthy and full of biodiversity while they lived there, as opposed to what happened with the newcomers. What do you think, that there wasn't food for these people? Just because agriculture hadn't arrived yet? Clearly there was food. The mindset of people today shows a lack of appreciation for nature as it is, what it provides, just by being nature, its intrinsic values. If you look over a habitat and can only think, how can I use this land for economic purposes? What can I turn this into? You're missing the fact that the land is already in use by creatures that are currently living there, and that we, yes, we humans, are already benefiting from the ecosystem services taking place in those natural habitats, even if we're oblivious to those benefits being provided to us. So explorers, later followed by settlers, arrived from Europe believing nature existed to be conquered. That's the frontier environmental view. Nature is meant to be tamed. Manifest destiny. God gave us this land. It was meant to be, and we're supposed to harvest it. Which means converting every living creature into hides or meat and chopping down every forest along the way and unleashing your livestock upon all the native habitat. You know what the skill set of a rancher is? Find land prime for the raping and rape it. You know what the skill set of a hunter or trapper is? Find a healthy population of animals and fuck it right up its ass. Those of you uncomfortable with religion being brought into this, I can't not include religion as a part of the history because of manifest destiny, because of this mindset. It's so important for you to understand that the Christians arriving from Europe thought that the forest was the dwelling of the devil, that the missionaries eradicated people or converted them. And being converted basically meant turning into slaves. Good old Sir Francis Drake, explorer, / slave trader, / eradicator of native plants and animals, including human animals, the humans that lived there. And to this day, so much of California is still named after these people. Allow me to read something to you that is a revealing example of this mindset from Pilgrim leader William Bradford's well-known description of the forbidding Cape Cod shoreline as seen from the deck of the Mayflower in 1620. He depicts it as, quote, a hideous and desolate wilderness full of beasts and wild men. Cape Cod, seen as hideous because of all the trees. Can you imagine? But this effectively demonstrates the Christian idea of nature at the time, Satan's domain, and it effectively erases the humanity of the Indigenous Americans because they're people that live in Satan's domain. And if we're being honest with ourselves, this mindset continues today. Civilization means clean hands and streets and air conditioning and buildings. People that go out into the forest or camp for periods of time get respect on some level, but still, overall, it's uncivilized to live like the animals. It's uncivilized to live in the forest. It's uncivilized to be harmonious with the rest of nature. Essentially, Native Americans, indigenous people anywhere in the world, were condemned as barbarians because they knew how to live in a harmonious lifestyle. They had established an equilibrium with their surroundings rather than just harvesting it. This is what all living creatures that have evolved with the land do. This is what living creatures that have been in an area for millennia do. They find a niche. They find a way to fit in. And they continue to live and prosper, as do the things around them. But then you have the newcomers, the invaders, the settlers, arriving from afar, having no relationship with that land other than seeing it as something for them to cash in on, chopping down the very creatures that provide the core of biodiversity, all the other creatures that are a part of that biodiversity. And once the trees and other native plants are gone and all the animals are gone, this allows for conversion of the land to agricultural crops, agricultural animals. When getting rid of nature is the first step in establishing agriculture, I find it offensive to put that industry under the same umbrella as nature, as conserving nature. Biodiversity and all the planetary health benefits that come with that biodiversity have been turned into ranch land, farmland, mining land. There is no biodiversity in these places. There is no health. In fact, these places are often the origins of disease and contamination. It is an unnatural system that takes from the earth because it is an extractive, exploitive industry. To embrace this particular view of nature is to embrace the very culture that eradicated Deb's ancestors and their way of life. It is to embrace the destruction of nature under the foolish belief that crops are more important than trees, that the manure of millions of unnatural domesticated cattle is a good thing. Monoculture and commodity animals, not habitat, not native organisms working together in a complex ecological community. It means to embrace the draining of rivers for a food system that is broken, rather than remembering that nature was already providing food before the invaders came in and destroyed everything because they have a different idea of food. The delusion that farmland is the same as nature or even a distant relative of nature means that under Deb Haaland's watch we will continue to plummet to a dark end, just with a different veil over our eyes. Keep in mind that even the word conservation is misunderstood by most people. It is very different from preservation. Conservation just means not killing everything. Something that the early settlers had to wake up to. They had this vast land, seemingly unlimited resources that they just started wiping out. And then one day they were like, oh my God, we might actually wipe it out. So then they turned to conservation, which just means that you leave enough to where there will always be some left to keep harvesting. How kind. How kind. All while not recognizing what it was already providing. We like to pretend that such treatment was in the past. But Point Reyes National Seashore continues to be a reminder that the colonialist vision of the world is the one that matters, and any history before them is to be forgotten. The West Coast explorers, settlers, and ranchers killed and drove out the native animals and the native people. Today we have a shell. It's nice. It's nice because not all of it is dead yet, and we see a glimpse of what could be, and we're excited about that. This is just a shell of what's possible. And all the while, we continue to applaud a culture of killing and extraction. Sadly, Point Reyes is only one example of what's continuing to happen. The Coast Miwok people sought for years to have their ancient burial grounds recognized, soil that their ancestors have actually been in for thousands of years. They wanted historic recognition. If anyone can actually say their DNA is in the soil, it's them. These efforts were ignored by the white history writers who are in control. When the ranchers wanted their ranches to be declared historic, their proposal was immediately granted. And these newcomers get to say that it's their DNA that's in the land. The history of the Conquerors. And Deb Haaland is on their side. Sadly, Point Reyes is only one example of what is continuing to happen everywhere. And Deb Haaland is embracing this injustice, an injustice done to the people she is supposed to represent. Deb might be the whitest Native American ever. What's going on with wolves right now? Have you been paying attention? They're being eradicated. They're being hunted mercilessly. Now, right now, across the United States, under the watch of the current Department of the Interior. Even bison, elk, wild horses, rounded up and killed. For whom? Tell me who wants this to happen. Name a group. Name a group that wants these animals dead, other than ranchers. Just one group, ranchers, the people who see these animals as competition, as conflict for their industry, which wants that land for their animals. Same people Deb Haaland is embracing. What exactly is her slogan? I'm going to protect biodiversity by continuing to support the persecution of wildlife. I mean, bison are being killed in Yellowstone. Yellowstone! Supposedly there are too many, according to the Park Service, which, by the way, now I know the Park Service staff don't know shit. They just take orders from politicians like everyone else that we mistakenly call heroes. 42,000 humans applied to kill the bison, once again demonstrating the bloodlust of our species. And of course, these people have their excuses prepared. The most notable to me is always that their deep love for the animal is why they want to kill the animal. But guess who doesn't get to make a bid on this killing? Guess who doesn't get a chance at this? Guess who doesn't get a chance at the bison? Wolves. The ones that naturally should be controlling such populations. And why aren't wolf populations allowed to flourish? For the most part, in a word, ranchers. And what isn't ranchers? The other part is hunters. And those two groups are usually one and the same. We are continuing to watch biodiversity disappear while foolishly continuing to say the same things we were taught to say. Oh, look at the open space. That's nature. Nope. It's just death in a different form.